going to say, what can we give up to go and sign a quality free agent starter at guard for this football team? That's the direction I would look strongly at in free agency. And so everybody's going to wail about Kirk Cousins and say he had a disappointing first season here and this and that. And yeah, he had some great moments this year. The Packers game in Green Bay, 425 yards, 4 touchdowns, tied the game in the last seconds. Everybody says he can't win a big game. Well, he threw a touchdown pass, kind of a miraculous touchdown pass to Thielen, but the ball was right there. And then he converted the 2-point conversion to Diggs in that game. Had some other really good games. But then when it came down to crunch time and you're facing these tough defenses, the Bears twice, and even going back to the Buffalo game, they had a lot of trouble on the offensive line against that Buffalo pass rush. And so, yeah, I think ultimately Cousins' season up and down, and not sensational, but not terrible. And so, to me, I want to see Kirk Cousins playing behind a decent offensive line, a solid offensive line, and then I'll pass judgment on him and whether that was a good signing or not. And yeah, you would rather not have had to pay $28 million a year, perhaps. But did the 49ers get their money out of Garoppolo this year?
No.
Now that was due to injury.
Right.
That was $27.5 million. It was the going rate, and that's what you had to pay. And so I'll withhold final judgment on Kirk Cousins till I see what they do with that offensive line and beef it up and not have the 30th ranked rushing attack in the league when you've got 2 quality running backs and you've got some good blocking tight ends. And we've talked before, David Morgan's absence for a month really hurt the team. So a lot of factors to enter into the equation here.
You work with an agency that represents Adam Thielen. Let's talk about the Adam Thielen, Kirk Cousins sideline conversation. But first, let's thank.
That was a polite way to put it.
I'm a polite human being. White Bear Lake Superstore, Minnesota's #1 volume Buick and GMC dealer. They have a bunch of year-end holiday special deals, including on crew cab Denali's, $7,500 off, Yukon Denali, $4,200 off. They always have tire deals on their website, so check out whitebearlakesuperstore.com.
Yeah, definitely go to the whitebearlakesuperstore.com website and check it all out, because there are all kinds of great specials and deals from my friends, Paul Rubin, the longtime owner of the White Bear Lake Superstore, Buick GMC, and his general manager, Charlie Guttrell. They're great staff. Minnesota's #1 volume Buick GMC dealer, 4 years running, with the best selection and the only place to get the premium experience. And the White Bear Lake Superstore's winter event has been going on and still going on. There's the Denali sale, big savings on 2018, 2019 models, 17% off MSRP on 2019 Buick Envisions and Buick Encores. And on that 2018 GMC Sierra 1500, there's a fantastic offer with over $10,000 total value towards the Sierra. And the White Bear Lake Superstore also is the Quigley 4x4 van superstore. White Bear Lake Superstore, a certified elite dealer. Only 7% of GM dealers make the cut. So visit in person at 3900 Highway 61 North in White Bear Lake, or online at whitebearlakesuperstore.com for all your vehicle needs and the premium experience. Buick GMC, we are professional grade, great tire deals, and our friends at whitebearlakesuperstore.com, White Bear Lake Superstore, Buick GMC say happy holidays and happy New Year.
Awesome. And one other side note, SodaStick.com sponsors the basketball show with John Krasinski, and they have kind of a Vikings-related deal going on. They wanted to say thank you to everyone who purchased one of their John Randall shirts and helped donate money to the St. David's Center. And if you haven't yet, you can still do it. So go to SodaStick.com, check out that Vikings-related deal. I know SodaStick does a lot of good works, and so does John Randall, so I wanted to bring that to your attention. So Cousins and Thielen get it on the sideline. You were good friends with Chris Carter, who was a very emotional guy who could get emotional on the sideline. Randy Moss could get emotional on the sideline. It's not unusual in the NFL. I thought what was different this time, Jeff, was that it looked like Cousins was very willing to make it a big demonstrative thing, and usually it's the quarterback trying to calm things down.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting and different, as you said. Mm-hmm. And I think it just showed the frustration of that game and the season. It kind of embodied what had happened this year, and because Cousins didn't have time to throw, and if he did have time to throw, he thought he could that Adams should have cut off his route shorter or whatever, and so they got into the discussion, which was very demonstrative as we saw, and yeah, players do get emotional during a game, especially when there's frustration involved, and at that point in the game, the Vikings had a goose egg on the scoreboard too, and so that was a frustrating time, down 13-0, and so yeah, I thought it was not handled well necessarily by Kirk. And,
I agree with you.
And I think that he could have diffused it and calmed it down and just say, hey, let's sit down on the bench, let's talk about it with Kevin Stefanski and let's look at the iPad and see what happened, and I think that would have been the better course. But I think again it showed the frustration of the time and of that moment, and so I think they both handled it well after the game and diffused it quickly, and Kirk said, Adams my guy, he's one of the best guys in the league and all this and that, and so I'm sure there'll be no long-term repercussions from it, but again, it's just symptomatic of what they need to do, what the fatal flaw in this team was, which was lack of protection, and even when there was protection this year, I think Kirk was looking for the next hit to come or the next guy to hit him from behind or something. The fumbles early in the season, which he cleaned up later in the season, but maybe part of that thing was he got very cautious too.
Yes, he did.
And I think that may be one of the things that Adam's trying to say is, hey, and Diggs has said this too publicly. Give us a chance.
Right.
Throw it up to us if we're single covered. We can try to make a play, and they have made plays.
They're both Thielen and Diggs are both excellent at making plays on 50-50 balls, either, whether it's out-leaping defenders or out-wrestling defenders or using body position like basketball players. They're both really good at that.
Yeah, and Kyle Rudolph
and Rudolph's good at that too.
That's right. And so I think that part of the thing for Kirk as the season went on, I think he got more cautious and didn't want to throw interceptions, didn't want to have big turnovers, didn't want to fumble, which is understandable for some of the things that happened earlier in the season, but maybe got a little too cautious. And I think that's some of the stuff they can work on in the off season as they look back on what happened and understand that, hey, give us a chance to make a play. Sometimes that can work.
Yeah, absolutely. You see it all over the league every weekend. And you know what? I know it gets drilled into these guys' heads, don't throw interceptions, don't throw interceptions, don't throw interceptions. But sometimes throwing interceptions is just part of the process. You're going to throw, you don't want to throw 20, but sometimes throwing interceptions just means you're putting the ball in a position where you might make something good happen once in a while.
Yeah, and that's definitely true. And as we remember, the start of the season, Kirk had no interceptions basically through about almost the third game or second game at least, and the first interception went off Treadwell's hands.
Yeah.
And so interceptions do happen that sometimes they're not the quarterback's fault. Sometimes the guy runs a bad route or the wrong route, and then you just chalk it up that that's part of the game and move forward. So yeah, I think that definitely is something that will be addressed, I'm sure, in the off season.
Something very topical as we're talking today. We're recording the show on a Wednesday afternoon. There's a report that Hugh Jackson is a candidate to be the Vikings offensive coordinator, and that Kevin Stefanski is going to interview as the head coach for the Cleveland Browns and as an offensive coordinator under Pat Shurmur, or at least an offensive position under Pat Shurmur. The very real possibility Kevin Stefanski goes and works elsewhere. What do you think of Hugh Jackson as an offensive coordinator? Because what we kept hearing from Zimmer all year was run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. And Hugh Jackson's a guy who loves to run the ball. I could see him, and they work together in Cincinnati. I can see that being A, a fit, and B, maybe not such a good thing for this offense.
Yeah, I would personally rather see Kevin Stefanski
get
an opportunity and give him the reins. And he's been around this team. He knows the players. He knows the good and the bad of each guy and how he can maximize their ability. I think that it would perhaps set Cousins back a little bit in his preparation for year 2 to have to work with a new coordinator. And that's one of the things that people lose sight of a little bit when you talk about the expectations for this team. It was still a new quarterback coming in. It was still a new coordinator coming in. And then the coordinator was changed during the season. So a lot of things happened. I would rather see Kevin Stefanski get the opportunity and see what he can do with this offense. And I think he's a really smart guy. He's a good guy. He's got the respect of the locker room, players, coaches, and I hope he does get that opportunity. I think he deserves it. And Hugh Jackson, I don't know how that really improves things necessarily.
I don't think it does.
No,
I don't think the man. I'm not saying the man shouldn't have a job somewhere in the NFL. I just don't think this is the right place and time.
Right, and so I'm not going to say he can't do the job if he's hired. We'll have to see. But personally, I'd rather see Stefanski get the opportunity.
Absolutely. Let's wrap up the show by looking ahead to the playoffs. Again, we're doing this on Wednesday afternoon, looking at the weekend playoffs. And once again, check out whitebearlakesuperstore.com for all your Buick and GMC needs, and check out sodastick.com for that John Randall deal and all their other Minnesota-themed apparel. So you were talking about the Colts, so let's start there. Colts with a completely refurbished offensive line with Luck playing great. You know, an MVP candidate, probably not going to win the MVP, but he made himself one of the candidates. At Houston, which started very slowly and has played very well. And, for me, I love games like this because I love watching Andrew Luck and I love Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I think this is a terrific matchup, and I think it's a really tough one to call.
I agree.
And I think it's going to be a close game, and the team split during the regular season. The Colts beat the Texans in Week 14. It stopped their 10-game winning streak. And I just like the mojo that Luck and the Colts have right now, and whether I think they've won 8 out of 9 or whatever it is, and I know the Texans have won a ton of games too, and it's in Houston, but I don't think Indy fears going to Houston when they just won there. And so I just think at this stage of their careers, I'll take Andrew Luck a little bit over Deshaun Watson, who I think is a really good player.
Yes.
And I'm going to take the Colts 31-30 in kind of a thriller, and we'll see what happens. I think that it's going to be interesting because you got J.J. Watt, Jadeveon Clowney. I think that if they can put pressure against that Colts offensive line that has been so successful this year, I think that can swing the game perhaps in Houston's favor, or if Watson can make plays with his legs and whatnot. DeAndre Hopkins, terrific receiver. So this is going to be a fun game to watch. But I'm going to take the Colts.
I'm going to take the Texans just because I think that Luck and the offense. I think Luck works some magic this year, and I think that's a tough assignment to go on the road and win there. I'm really just basically basing on home team in that, which is probably a bad idea. Anyway, Chargers at Ravens, two really interesting teams. The Chargers looked like they had a shot at one of the top couple of seeds. They faded a little bit at the end, had some injuries, and they have to go east, which is hard for us West Coast teams, to play at Baltimore, which is a tough place to play, and the Ravens now have it kind of going on with Lamar Jackson in their running game.
Definitely, I think that Baltimore team is really kind of a team that surprised a lot of people this year, and of course so did the Chargers. So, which is the beauty of the NFL, as you said, and it's a rematch of a game just a couple weeks ago. Baltimore went out to L.A. and beat the Chargers 22-10 in that game, and put a lot of pressure on Phillip Rivers. Had 2 interceptions in the game, several sacks, and I just don't see any reason why this week would be different going back to Baltimore when they beat them out in L.A. when both teams needed to win, and the Baltimore defense is very stout. And so I'm going to take Baltimore in this game, but I think it'll be a little closer than last time. I'll call it 24-20.
That's a good call. I'm going to go like 27-19, something like that, but the same pick. NFC wild card. Eagles at Bears. Eagles, of course, got Nick Foles magic going again. They're playing better than they were when the Vikings played them early in the year. They seem to really rally around Foles, and we know what the Bears did to the Vikings and how good they are.
This is, I think, to me, it's the premier game of Wild Card Weekend. I think the NFL feels the same way because they put it in that Sunday late afternoon slot, and so you got the defending Super Bowl champs, the Eagles, going into Soldier Field. I think that Nick Foles, we know that he's got the magic late in the season playoffs, and the Eagles feel like they've got second life now, which is kind of a dangerous team situation to be in when you have that kind of situation. But I still feel like that Bears defense is so tough, and I think that they'll control the Eagles' offense and Foles to a great enough extent. And then I think the whole wild card for the Bears in the playoffs is Mitch Trubisky. And I wrote about that in